The Galactic Academy was said to be one of the safest places in the known galaxy. No wars were allowed here, no violence, no danger. It was a sanctuary of learning, not a battlefield for survival. At least, that's what every alien student believed. The classroom was vast and bright, designed with floating desks and soft, ambient light that intelligently adjusted to the unique visual needs of every species. Students from dozens of different worlds sat in quiet attention, their varied shapes and colors creating a vibrant mosaic across the room. Some had scales that shimmered under the gentle light. Some were covered in fur of every imaginable hue. A few even floated slightly above their seats, held aloft by their own biology. All of them, without exception, were focused on their instructor. Today's lesson was simple, basic survival biology. The instructor, a tall, elegant insectoid being named Professor Zelder, spoke in a calm, melodic tone. He explained the fundamental ways most species reacted to physical injury. First came the pain, then the shock, and finally, the absolute necessity for immediate medical intervention. For nearly every known race in the galaxy, even the smallest wounds could quickly spiral into a fatal event. Tucked away at the back of the room sat the human. His name was Ethan Cole. To the casual observer, he was utterly unremarkable. He had no claws, no natural armor, no visibly thick hide, just soft flesh, simple fabric clothes, and a posture so relaxed it bordered on nonchalant. Many of the alien students still couldn't quite grasp why humans had been admitted to the prestigious academy in the first place. They just looked so weak, so fragile. Professor Zelder gestured towards a training device on a nearby table. It was a standard piece of equipment used to demonstrate controlled cuts on synthetic skin, completely harmless, or at least, it was supposed to be. Observe carefully. The instructor's voice resonated through the silent room. This device is calibrated for a sharp, metallic snap cut him off, echoing through the wide space. Before anyone could process the sound, the device malfunctioned catastrophically. A thin, razor-sharp blade shot out, moving faster than the eye could follow. It sliced cleanly across the back of Ethan's hand. For a half-second, an eternity of stunned silence held the room captive. Then, the first drop of blood appeared. Dark red liquid welled up from the cut, spilled over his fingers, and fell to the pristine floor below. The sound of the single drop hitting the surface was tiny, almost inaudible, yet it felt like a thunderclap in the sudden quiet. One of the students screamed, a high-pitched sound of pure terror. Another recoiled so violently they tumbled backward out of their floating seat. Several other aliens simply froze solid, their eyes wide with horror, their breathing becoming rapid and shallow. To them, this wasn't just a minor accident. This was a death event. Blood meant the body's systems were failing. Blood meant the end was near. Professor Zelder shouted for emergency protocols. His usual calm shattered. The room's soft lighting instantly switched to a pulsating, emergency red. Warning symbols materialized in the air, glowing ominously. A top priority medical alert was broadcast across the entire academy. Utter panic erupted. Some students scrambled to hide under their desks. Others made a mad rush for the exits, desperate to escape the scene of imminent death. The rest just stared at Ethan, their minds paralyzed by a morbid fascination, waiting for him to collapse. But Ethan didn't fall. He didn't even flinch. He just looked down at his hand, blinked once, and a look of mild annoyance crossed his face. "Ah, great," he muttered under his breath. At the sound of his voice, the frantic instructor stopped moving. The stampede of panicked students halted. The entire classroom went utterly, unnervingly silent. Ethan, with his uninjured hand, casually reached into his pocket, searched for something, and then let out a small sigh. He looked up at the nearest student, a small reptilian alien who was trembling uncontrollably. "Hey," Ethan said, his voice completely calm. "Do you have a bandage?" No one answered. The words didn't compute. A bandage? He was bleeding profusely. His skin was torn open. His life fluid was literally pooling on the floor. He should be screaming in agony. He should be unconscious from shock. He should be dying. Instead, he was asking for a simple piece of first aid. The reptilian student, still shaking, slowly shook their head and backed away as if Ethan were a ghost. Ethan just shrugged. "Okay, guess I'll wait." He then did something that defied all known biology. He simply pressed his thumb against the cut to apply pressure and slow the bleeding. His heart rate, tracked by the room's passive monitors, stayed perfectly normal. His breathing remained even and calm. Professor Zelder felt an emotion he hadn't experienced in centuries. Pure, unadulterated fear. Not the fear of death, but the chilling fear of a new, terrifying understanding. Just then, medical drones burst into the room, their engines whining as they swarmed around Ethan. Advanced scanners passed over his body, their displays flashing with red warning signs. Tissue damage detected. One drone announced in a synthesized voice, severe pain response. Expected. Ethan looked up at the hovering machine. Yeah, it hurts, he said conversationally. That's normal. The drones paused their frantic movements. Their logic circuits struggled to process his statement. Pain wasn't something you just acknowledged. Pain was a signal that overwhelmed you, controlled you, shut you down. The alien students watched in a state of suspended disbelief as Ethan leaned back in his chair, casually holding his bleeding hand, as if it were a minor inconvenience, not a life-threatening disaster. Blood continued to drip steadily onto the floor. No screaming. No panic. Just waiting. The instructor, Professor Zelder, took a slow, deliberate step closer, moving with the caution one would use when approaching an unknown and potentially dangerous creature. Human Ethan, he said, his voice trembling slightly. You are injured. I know, Ethan replied, his tone flat. You may enter systemic shock at any moment. Probably not, Ethan said with a shrug. It's not that deep. A collective chill swept through the room. Alien minds, evolved over millennia to see injury as a critical failure, raised with a mixture of fear and utter confusion. If this wound was not that deep for a human, then what in the galaxy did they consider to be deep? In the back of the room, one student whispered, "He should be dead." Another whispered back, their voice filled with awe and terror, "Why is he still talking?" One of the medical drones tried to activate its emergency stasis field, a protocol designed to freeze a patient to prevent further damage. Ethan gently pushed it away with his good hand. "Hey, don't freeze me," he said, a hint of irritation in his voice. "I have another class after this." And that was the final straw. That was when the true, deep-seated panic began. The academy alarms grew louder, more insistent. Security forces could be heard rushing towards the classroom, but Ethan just sat there, blood dripping from his hand, waiting patiently for a bandage. The Galactic Academy had faced many threats in its long history, but it had never faced anything like this. Never a species that treated a grievous injury like an everyday nuisance. Never a student who bled so calmly while the rest of the galaxy held its breath in horror. And in that frozen classroom, bathed in the pulsating red light of the alarms, surrounded by fear and confusion, everyone finally realized the truth. Humans weren't weak at all. They were terrifying, in the quietest, most unsettling way imaginable. The alarms wouldn't stop. They screamed through the halls of the Galactic Academy, a sharp, piercing sound echoing on every level, warning everyone that something had gone terribly wrong. Red emergency lights bathed the corridors in a pulsing, bloody glow as heavy security doors slammed shut, sealing off the entire sector. Inside the classroom, the air grew thick and heavy. Alien students were frozen in their seats, a menagerie of species united by a single, terrifying sight. Some trembled, their bodies shaking uncontrollably. Others whispered desperate prayers to their homeworld spirits, their voices barely audible under the blare of the alarms. But their eyes, all of them, never left the human. Ethan Cole. He just sat there, quietly, at his desk. His injured hand rested on the surface, the blood flow slowing, but still seeping between his fingers. The floor beneath him was stained a deep, alarming red, a color many species associated only with one thing: death. The security officers arrived first. They were tall, imposing beings encased in full armor, their energy shields humming as they formed a wide, cautious circle around Ethan. Their weapons were powered on, ready, but not yet aimed. To them, this wasn't just a student who'd had an accident. This was a Deathworlder injury, an entirely different category of emergency. One of the officers spoke, his voice filtered through a translator, but the tremor was unmistakable. "Human student, remain still. Medical teams are on their way." Ethan looked up, his expression more confused than pained. "I am still," he said, his voice even. "I've been still this whole time." That simple answer just made everything worse. The officers exchanged nervous, uncertain glances. His voice was too steady, dangerously steady. Professor Zelder, their survival biology instructor, stood pressed against the far wall, his sharp, multifaceted eyes watching the scene unfold with a growing sense of dread. In all his cycles teaching, he'd never seen anything like it. For nearly every known species in the galaxy, pain was the ultimate controller. Pain caused panic. Pain caused collapse. It was a fundamental biological imperative. But this human did not obey pain. Finally, the medical team burst in. Unlike the security drones, these were living, breathing doctors from several different species, all wearing full-body protective suits. They moved with a slow, deliberate caution, as if they were stepping into a radioactive contamination zone. A tall, avian doctor, her plumage ruffled with anxiety, aimed a scanner at Ethan's hand. As the readings appeared on her datapad, her feathers puffed up in shock. "This level of tissue damage," she chirped, her voice high with disbelief. "It should be causing extreme systemic distress. Why is he not sedated?" Ethan let out a small sigh, almost of boredom. "I don't need it," he said calmly. "Just clean it up and wrap it, please." The doctors froze. One whispered to another, "No species refuses pain management. It's unheard of." The other replied, his voice a low rumble, "He is not a normal species." The alien students listened, their fear curdling into something deeper. Humans weren't just different. They were wrong, flawed in some fundamental, terrifying way. Or worse, maybe they were built for suffering. The avian doctor spoke again, her voice louder, trying to sound authoritative. "Human Ethan, pain is a biological warning, a signal to stop. You must respect it." Ethan looked directly at her, and a small, almost tired smile touched his lips. "Pain is information," he corrected gently. "It doesn't mean stop. It means be careful." The room fell completely silent. That one sentence seemed to hang in the air, burning itself into every alien mind. Be careful, but continue. The very idea was insane. The medical team, shaken, finally went to work cleaning the wound. Ethan winced, just for a moment, his jaw tightening. A few students gasped, expecting the scream that was supposed to follow. But it never came. As soon as the sterile bandage was wrapped securely around his hand, he relaxed completely. "Thanks," he said, his politeness somehow more unsettling than a scream would have been. The doctors stepped back as if they'd touched a live power conduit. The security officers lowered their weapons, but none of them relaxed their stance. Their training manuals had a special section on Deathworlders, and one line was flashing in their minds: if a species can remain calm while critically injured, what are they capable of in a real fight? Outside the sealed classroom, the academy was in chaos. Administrators sprinted through the halls. Emergency council meetings were being called. Data files on humanity, dusty archives that hadn't been opened in generations, were being accessed across the network. The word Deathworld appeared on screen after screen. Back in the classroom, the alien students slowly, hesitantly, began to move. Many gave Ethan's desk an even wider berth, but one, a tall, willowy being with soft, bioluminescent skin named Lyra, found her courage. "Human Ethan?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Were you afraid?" Ethan considered the question for a moment. "Not really," he said honestly. "It's just a cut." Several students audibly gasped. "Just a cut." Lyra's voice trembled as she replied, "On my world, we can lose limbs from injuries like that." For the first time, Ethan's smile faded. A look of genuine sympathy crossed his face. "Oh," he said softly. "Yeah, that would be rough." He didn't say, "That's serious," or "You should panic." Just quiet, simple understanding. That small moment of empathy was somehow more frightening to them than any display of arrogance could have been. Professor Zelder finally found his voice. "Human Ethan," he said, speaking slowly, as if each word was a heavy weight. "How many times have you been injured before?" Ethan scratched the back of his head with his good hand. "I don't know," he admitted, looking slightly embarrassed. "A lot." The room went still again. Alien children were injured maybe once or twice in their entire youth. Seasoned veterans, soldiers from galactic wars, were injured many times. But what kind of world produced students who lost count? Ethan stood up, moving carefully. The security team tensed, but he just grabbed his bag from the floor. "So are we going to finish class later?" he asked. "I don't want to fall behind on the material." No one answered him. The professor, looking pale, dismissed the class immediately. The alien students scrambled out of the room, their whispers now turning into a torrent of panicked chatter. Rumors began to fly, evolving with every telling. He ignored the pain entirely. He just sat there and talked while he was bleeding out. He smiled about it. Ethan walked out last, with the security team as his escort. They weren't treating him like a prisoner, but he definitely wasn't just a normal student anymore. From that day forward, everything at the Galactic Academy changed. Humans were no longer seen as the fragile, unassuming newcomers. They were something else, something that endured, something that didn't stop, even when it was broken. And in the minds of every alien student, a new, terrifying thought began to take root. If this is how a human acts when they accidentally hurt, what happens when they get truly angry? Ethan Cole was taken to the medical wing under quiet escort. The halls of the Galactic Academy felt different now, heavy with an unnerving silence. Students would stop talking as he passed. Some pressed themselves against the walls as if to get as far away as possible. Others just stared, their eyes wide with a mixture of fear and confusion. Ethan noticed it all, but he didn't say anything. To him, this was just another bad day, one that was sure to end with a mountain of paperwork. The medical wing was exactly as he expected, clean, white, and eerily silent. The only sound was the soft hum of advanced machinery. Inside a sealed room, a team of doctors from a dozen different species waited, their attention fixed on the streams of data scrolling across floating screens. The doors hissed shut behind Ethan. "Please sit," said a tall, aquatic doctor. Her voice, smooth and serene, was filtered through a translator device. Ethan hopped onto the medical table and rested his bandaged hand on his knee. He looked around at the anxious faces. "I told them I'm fine," he said with a sigh. "This all seems like a lot." No one answered. The doctors were completely absorbed by the scans appearing on their displays. Bones, muscles, nerves, blood flow, healing rate. As the data updated in real time, the atmosphere in the room grew colder, more tense. One by one, the medical experts began to understand the impossible truth in front of them. This cannot be correct," whispered a reptilian surgeon, his voice raspy with disbelief. The aquatic doctor leaned closer to her screen, her gills fluttering slightly. "His pain receptors are functioning normally," she confirmed, her tone flat with astonishment. Another doctor chimed in, "And yet his physiological stress response is minimal, almost non-existent." Professor Zelder, a towering insectoid, had been standing silently in the corner. His multifaceted compound eyes, which could see in multiple spectrums, narrowed as he studied the data. He finally broke his silence, his voice a low chitter. "Explain." The reptilian surgeon swallowed hard, a visible ripple running down his throat. "Professor, the human body it's built to survive repeated damage. Pain doesn't seem to stop them. It only warns them." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "That's what I said earlier." His attempt at a joke fell flat. No one even cracked a smile. One of the doctors, a gelatinous being, pulled up historical records from Earth. Human wars, human labor, human sports. Images flashed across the screen. Gruesome injuries being treated with what looked like primitive tools. Broken bones that had healed and, in some cases, been broken again. Healing scars everywhere. The doctor said quietly, "Old fractures, micro tears in the muscle tissue that have repaired themselves stronger. Nerve damage, repaired." The lead aquatic doctor turned her gaze from the screens to Ethan, her large, dark eyes filled with a new, dawning horror. "You have lived with pain your entire life," she said. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact. Ethan just shrugged, a casual gesture that sent a fresh wave of shock through the room. "Everyone does." The room went absolutely silent. No one corrected him, because for the first time, these beings from 100 peaceful worlds understood something truly terrible. On most planets, pain was a signal that ended activity. It was a full stop. On Earth, pain was just the beginning. It shaped lives. A young medical assistant, barely out of training, asked the question that no one else dared to voice. "Human Ethan, why did you not scream?" Ethan thought for a moment, genuinely considering it. "Because screaming doesn't fix anything," he said simply. "You learn to breathe through it." Professor Zelder felt a deep, primal chill move through his chitinous body. Breathe through it, not escape it, not avoid it, endure it. The concept was utterly alien. The doctors continued the scan, probing deeper into his biology, and then they found something else. "This is abnormal," the reptilian surgeon said slowly, pointing a clawed finger at a new set of readings. "His body is already repairing the wound, at an accelerated rate, without any medical aid." The aquatic doctor asked, her voice laced with incredulity. "Yes." Another profound silence fell over them. One doctor, a being of pure energy contained in a shimmering field, finally spoke the truth that had been hanging in the air. "Humans are not resistant to pain," she said, her voice like soft chimes. "They are trained by it." Ethan started to look uncomfortable now, shifting on the table. "I wouldn't say trained," he corrected. "You just grow up." That answer frightened them more than anything else he could have said. Grow up. The phrase implied childhood. It meant humans learned this brutal endurance from a young age. Outside the room, a security officer's wristcom beeped with an urgent message. It was from the Galactic Council. They had caught wind of the incident and were requesting a full, unredacted report. "Not tomorrow, not in an hour. Now." Back inside the medical wing, Professor Zelder stepped forward, his movements deliberate. "Human Ethan, he said carefully. If this injury had happened on your homeworld, what would you have done? Ethan answered without a second thought. Clean it, wrap it, keep working. And if it were worse, the professor pressed. Ethan paused, then looked the professor in his many eyes. Then I'd still keep working, he said, just slower. Professor Zelder felt something heavy and cold settle in his mind. The terrifying realization that humans did not ask asterisk if asterisk they could continue. They only asked asterisk how asterisk. The examination finally concluded. Ethan was cleared to leave, though it was clear none of the doctors were happy with that decision. You may return to class tomorrow, the aquatic doctor said, her professional calm barely masking her unease. Try to avoid stress. Ethan gave her a polite, easy smile. I'll try. As he walked out of the medical wing and back into the main corridors, the alien staff and students watched him go, but the confusion in their eyes was gone, replaced by a quiet, growing fear. Across the Academy's internal network, rumors were already spreading faster than light. Humans heal while awake. Humans stay calm while bleeding. Humans feel pain but they do not obey it. Students gathered in small, hushed groups, whispering the implications. If they can do this in school, one asked, what do they do in a war? Another answered softly, the words hanging in the air like a death sentence. They win. Ethan returned to his dorm room and sat on his bed. He unwrapped the new bandage just enough to check the wound, saw the edges already knitting together, and nodded to himself. Yeah, he said quietly, that'll heal. He lay back and stared at the ceiling, completely unaware that his simple, lifelong habit of endurance had just shaken an entire galactic civilization to its core. Miles away, in his office overlooking the Academy grounds, Professor Zelder stared at the completed medical report. Before sending it to the Galactic Council, he added a single, chilling note at the end. Humans are not fearless. They are familiar with suffering. He paused, his mandibles clicking, then added one final, ominous line. And that makes them dangerous in ways we do not yet understand. Somewhere in the Academy, the last of the emergency alarms finally stopped blaring, but the fear did not. It had only just begun. The next day, a strange quiet settled over the Galactic Academy. Classes were back in session, but the usual buzz of activity was gone. The hallways were nearly silent. Students spoke in hushed tones, their eyes darting around nervously. Every screen displayed updated safety notices, but no one was reading them. Their minds were all on one thing, the human. Ethan Cole walked through the Academy halls just like any other day. A clean white bandage was still wrapped around his hand. He carried his bag casually over one shoulder, moving at an easy, unhurried pace. But today, the Academy watched his every move. Alien students would stop their conversations as he passed. Some would quickly step aside, making way for him. Others stared a little too long, their expressions a mix of curiosity and confusion, trying to make sense of what they were seeing. Ethan couldn't help but notice the looks. He let out a quiet sigh. This is going to be one of those days, he muttered to himself. In the vast main study hall, a group of alien students had gathered near a long table. They were a diverse bunch, from different worlds, different species, each with their own unique appearance, but a shared sense of fear had brought them all together. Lyra, a tall alien with soft, smooth skin, stood at the front of the group, her hands trembling slightly. He's coming, someone whispered, and a wave of nervous energy rippled through the crowd. Just then, Ethan entered the hall. He froze in his tracks when he saw the entire group turn to look at him, their many eyes fixed on his every move. Hi, he said, a little awkwardly. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, Lyra took a hesitant step forward. Human Ethan, she said, her voice careful and measured. May we speak with you? Ethan paused, surprised, but then nodded. Sure. He set his bag down on the floor and leaned casually against the edge of the table. The silence stretched on, thick and uncomfortable. Finally, one of the students couldn't hold it in any longer and blurted out, Why didn't you panic? Ethan blinked, confused. About what? He asked. Your injury, another student said quickly. You were bleeding. Ethan glanced down at his bandaged hand as if just remembering it. That. His casual dismissal made several of the students lean back nervously. Yes, Lyra said, her voice tense. That. Ethan scratched the back of his neck, looking a bit sheepish. Because panicking doesn't help. That simple answer sent a wave of discomfort through the group. On many of their worlds, panic was a natural, instinctual response. It was a key part of survival. Lyra swallowed hard. Did you feel fear at all? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan actually seemed to consider the question for a moment. His expression turned serious. I felt annoyed, he said finally. It happened during class. The students exchanged bewildered looks, annoyed, not terrified, not desperate for help. Annoyed. A smaller alien with long, thin limbs spoke up next. On my planet, it said, its voice reedy, we would faint from blood loss that small. Ethan frowned, his brow furrowing in genuine concern. Really? He asked. Yes. Ethan nodded slowly, processing the information. That sounds rough. Again, there was no judgment in his voice, no hint of pride or superiority, just a simple, sincere understanding. This reaction confused them even more than arrogance would have. Lyra took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. Human Ethan, were you trained for pain? Ethan shook his head. No. Then how? She pressed, her voice filled with a desperate need to understand. Ethan paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was softer. You grow up falling, he said, scraping your knees, breaking bones sometimes. You just get back up because dinner's ready, or you have school tomorrow. The study hall grew completely quiet. Those words, spoken so simply, carried an immense weight. On many worlds, children were shielded from all harm, protected at all costs. But human children, it seemed they were tested by life itself from a young age. Another student spoke, their voice filled with disbelief. Does it not damage you? Ethan lifted his bandaged hand, a wry smile on his face. It does, he said, but damage isn't the end. That sentence hung in the air, a powerful, simple truth. Damage isn't the end. Lyra felt something shift deep inside her, a fundamental belief being challenged. On our worlds, she said slowly, her voice filled with a newfound understanding, injury means weakness. Ethan met her gaze, his eyes steady and clear. On mine, he said, it means you survived. The profound difference in perspective shook them to their core. One student, seemingly emboldened, stepped closer, their eyes fixed on Ethan's bandage. Does it still hurt? They asked quietly. Yeah, Ethan said with a simple, honest nod. It does. Then why are you smiling? Another asked, pointing out something Ethan hadn't even noticed. He looked surprised for a second. I guess because it'll heal, he said, the words a simple statement of fact. It wasn't denial. It wasn't ignorance. It was hope, born from a lifetime of experience. From a safe distance, Academy security officers watched the interaction, ready to intervene at a moment's notice. But they didn't move. This wasn't a threat. This was a bridge being built. This was understanding being born. A tall, armored alien who had been silent until now finally spoke, his voice a low rumble. If humans feel pain like we do, why are you not controlled by it? Ethan leaned back, thinking for a moment. Because pain isn't an order, he said thoughtfully. It's a message. The words landed with the force of a physical blow. Pain as information, not a command. For Lyra, the fear she had felt began to transform into something else entirely. Respect, human Ethan, she said, her voice now steady and clear. Are all humans like you? Ethan offered a slight, self-deprecating smile. Some are tougher, he admitted. Some are softer. But yeah, most of us learn this stuff pretty early. That answer was somehow more unsettling than any claim of special training. This wasn't an extraordinary ability. This was normal for his species. Just then, the academy bell rang, its chime echoing through the silent hall, signaling the start of the next class. But no one moved. Ethan, however, picked up his bag. Well, he said, I should probably get going. As if on instinct, the crowd of students parted, creating a clear path for him. As Ethan walked away, a flurry of whispers followed him. He treats pain like it's the weather. He expects to be hurt. He expects to continue. Lyra watched him disappear down the hallway, her mind racing. For the first time, she felt a strange, unsettling thought take root. If humans could endure pain without breaking, what else could they endure? High above the academy, in a secure monitoring room, administrators were watching the recorded footage of the meeting. One of them spoke, their voice low and contemplative. They are not monsters. Another replied, no. A third voice added, they are survivors. Later that night, back in his dorm room, Ethan carefully unwrapped his bandage. The wound already looked better, the skin beginning to knit itself back together. He smiled faintly to himself. See, he said to the empty room. Told you. Across the galaxy, detailed reports were being written and filed. The Galactic Academy had not just met a human, it had come face to face with the truth of humanity. And that truth, in all its resilient, unassuming power, was terrifying. The change didn't happen loudly. There were no grand speeches, no announcements broadcast across the academy, no official warnings posted on the network. And yet, everyone felt it. A new truth had settled over the Galactic Academy. Humans were different. Ethan Cole returned to his classes as if nothing had happened. He showed up on time, took his notes, and asked the same thoughtful questions he always did. On the surface, he was the same student, but the Academy no longer saw him that way. Eyes followed him now. It wasn't just the alien students from his own class, but others who had only heard the story whispered in the halls. They would point at his bandaged hand, and keep pointing even long after it had healed. Some classmates would subtly shift away from him, creating a small, invisible bubble. Others, driven by a strange mix of fear and curiosity, moved closer. In the training halls, a quiet revolution was underway. Instructors began to adjust their lesson plans. Safety parameters were reviewed. Risk simulations were completely rewritten. Any exercise involving a human participant was now flagged with new, urgent notes. Humans tolerate higher pain levels. Humans may continue to function despite significant injury. Do not assume human distress signals equate to incapacitation. These digital warnings spread from one instructor's screen to the next, becoming a new, unwritten part of the curriculum. Alien students started noticing something else, too. Humans were unnervingly calm under pressure. During a difficult physical test, one Xylodian student slipped, his leg twisting at an unnatural angle. He cried out, and a wave of panic spread through the other trainees. Medical staff rushed in, their voices sharp with urgency. But Ethan was the closest. He moved without hesitation, steadying the injured student, his voice a calm, reassuring presence until the medics took over. His tone never wavered. The injured Xylodian later told his friends, when he spoke, the pain felt smaller. That story traveled fast. Humans weren't loud, boastful heroes. They were quiet anchors in a storm. Lyra, a Xylosian cadet known for her sharp observations, watched all of this unfold. She saw how other students now hesitated before calling humans fragile. She noticed how instructors listened more intently when a human offered an opinion, as if their words carried a new weight. One afternoon, she found Ethan in the quiet of the study hall and sat beside him. "You've changed the academy," she said, her voice barely a whisper. Ethan just looked confused. "I didn't mean to." "That," she replied softly, "might be what's so unsettling." The ripples spread far beyond the academy walls. Reports reached other schools, distant stations, and even other worlds. A human student ignored a serious injury. A human asked for a simple bandage instead of a full medical rescue. A human treated pain as a routine inconvenience. The Galactic Council demanded daily updates, their chambers buzzing with uneasy questions. What if humans hide their injuries during a battle? One counselor asked. What if they can fight past limits we consider absolute? Another added. A third, a veteran of a dozen conflicts, whispered the most chilling question of all. What if pain simply doesn't stop them? There were no comforting answers. Back at the academy, the atmosphere grew thick with mixed emotions. Some alien students now feared humans more than ever, avoiding them completely, but others admired their resilience. A few even tried to imitate it. During one training session, a young Gorn cadet refused to stop for rest after a minor sprain. He collapsed from exhaustion just minutes later. The instructor immediately halted the entire exercise. He looked at the fallen cadet, then at the rest of the class, his expression firm. "You are not human," he said, his voice ringing with authority. "Do not pretend to be." That single sentence echoed through the halls and became a new, unspoken rule. Humans were not an example to be imitated. They were a phenomenon to be understood. Ethan felt the growing tension. Conversations would die down the moment he entered a room. Teachers would phrase their questions to him with an extra layer of caution. One evening, Professor Zelder, the Academy's wise, insectoid historian, asked Ethan to join him for a walk through the serene Academy gardens. "You confuse them, you know," the professor said, his mandibles clicking softly. Ethan nodded, his gaze on the bioluminescent flora. "I get that a lot. Do you know why?" Zelder pressed. Ethan thought for a moment. "Because I didn't act like they expected me to." "No," the professor said slowly, stopping near a tranquil water pool. "It is because you acted like yourself." He turned to face Ethan, his multifaceted eyes reflecting the garden's soft light. "You come from a harsh world, Ethan. One that has shaped your species through generations of struggle and pain." Ethan just shrugged. "Earth isn't actively trying to kill us. It's just not gentle." That simple, honest answer stayed with the professor long after their walk. Not cruel, not malevolent, just unforgiving. That night, a new, revised report was transmitted to the Galactic Council. It stated, "Humans do not seek pain. They simply do not fear it in the same way." In the dorms, the late-night debates continued. If they can ignore pain, one student theorized, can they ignore fear? Two, another replied, maybe fear just works differently for them. Maybe it's more of a suggestion. Lyra, looking out her window at the endless sea of stars, offered her own thought. Or maybe, she said to the room, they learned a long time ago that fear doesn't stop reality from happening. Miles away, in the solitude of his room, Ethan stretched his healed hand. The cut had closed into a thin, pale scar. He traced its line with his finger. Just another mark, another memory. On Earth, scars told stories of survival. Here, they were seen as warnings. The Academy soon announced a new series of joint training exercises, designed to foster interspecies cooperation. In a move that shocked many, humans were placed in key leadership roles, not because they were the strongest or the fastest, but because they remained functional under extreme stress. The decision was radical, but no one argued. The reputation was already set in stone. Humans endured, humans adapted, humans continued, and deep within the Academy's culture, fear began to change its shape. It was no longer a simple fear of danger or of the unknown. It was becoming a fear of misunderstanding something immensely powerful. Because if this was how calm humans were while they were bleeding, what would they be like when they were defending someone else? As Ethan prepared for the next day, he had no idea that the final, defining lesson was just on the horizon. It wouldn't happen in a classroom or in a medical bay. It would happen in a single, terrifying moment that would show the entire galaxy exactly why humans were both feared and respected. The final day of the week brought a strange silence to the Galactic Academy. The halls, usually buzzing with the chatter of 1,000 different species, were now hushed. Students whispered only to themselves, their eyes darting toward a single figure walking calmly through the main corridor. Ethan Cole. His hand, which had been bandaged for weeks, was now fully healed. Not a mark remained, save for a faint scar that seemed less like an injury and more like a quiet badge of survival. To every alien observer, it was proof of something terrifying. For weeks, stories about Ethan had traveled faster than light through the Academy's communication networks. Other schools, other planets, and even the Galactic Council were all watching. Humans were no longer just another species of student. They were anomalies. They were variables that could not be ignored. Today was the practical survival exam. Students would face a gauntlet of simulated life and death situations, intense combat scenarios, emergency rescue missions, and high-risk environments designed to push every species to their absolute limits. The exercise was intended to expose weaknesses, to find the breaking point of each individual. But for Ethan, it was just another Tuesday. The instructors gave their final instructions. Alien students listened nervously, their scales shivering, their wings folding tightly, or their limbs trembling with anticipation. Many of them glanced at Ethan, unsure if his calm demeanor was a sign of incredible bravery or sheer madness. Then, the simulations began. An explosion of sound and light rocked the arena. The walls shook, lights flickered, and alarms blared, signaling mechanical failures. The alien students reacted as expected. They screamed, they froze, or they stumbled as simulated dangers erupted all around them. But Ethan moved with a calm that was deeply unsettling. Every step was measured, every action was deliberate. When a simulated ceiling collapsed, sending debris raining down, several aliens panicked and fell backward. Without hesitation, Ethan lunged forward and grabbed one of them, pulling them to safety. His previously injured hand worked flawlessly. Not a single flicker of fear crossed his face. The instructors observed from a control room high above. Professor Zelther's large, compound eyes narrowed. Notice, he whispered to his colleagues, he does not react like the rest. There is no panic. The aliens who Ethan had saved stared at him in disbelief. The simulation was designed to break them, to induce overwhelming panic. But Ethan moved as if it were a walk in the park. One small, trembling alien student finally voiced the question on everyone's mind. Does he not feel fear? Ethan glanced back, offering a faint, almost cryptic smile. I do, he said, but fear doesn't tell me to stop. It tells me to move smart. Whispers spread like wildfire. The entire simulation arena fell quiet, not out of respect, but from a deep, primal awareness dawning on them all. Humans were different, and in the cold calculus of the galaxy, different often meant dangerous. As the final phase of the exam began, the alarms blared even louder. The environment shifted again. Simulated fire now filled the corridors, and thick, acrid smoke made breathing nearly impossible. The alien students began to falter. One by one, they succumbed to the chaos, coughing, panicking, freezing in their tracks. That's when Ethan's voice cut through the noise, clear and steady. Stay low. Move toward the exit. Don't stop. They followed him. They followed because there was no other choice. His words carried an authority that wasn't born from arrogance, but from action. It was a lesson the galaxy was just beginning to learn. Humans didn't demand attention, they earned it. The last obstacle loomed ahead, a deep, gaping chasm spanned only by a single narrow beam. It was a final test of nerve. A young alien student, halfway across, lost their footing and froze, paralyzed by terror. Ethan approached, his steps as steady as stone. He reached out his hand. "Grab my hand," he said, his voice firm. "I won't let you go." Fear trembled in the alien's eyes, but Ethan's grip was unyielding. He held on, guiding the terrified student across to safety. When they reached the other side, several students looked at Ethan with a new expression. For the first time, it was awe. Respect had finally begun to replace fear, but not completely. The fear still lingered, but it had transformed into something else, a profound understanding that humans weren't just capable, they were dangerously unpredictable. When the exercise ended, the instructors called all the students to the main hall for the debriefing. It was unusual. Professor Zelder stood before them, his voice steady but filled with a thoughtful gravity. "Humans are unlike any species we have ever taught," he began. "They endure injury that would incapacitate others. They continue to function under stress that would shatter most minds. They listen to fear, but they do not obey it. They survive where others would fail." A heavy silence followed his words. The alien students looked at each other, their minds struggling to process this new, undeniable truth. Finally, one brave student raised their hand. "Professor, are they dangerous?" Zelder paused, letting the question hang in the air. His voice dropped, becoming low and serious. "Dangerous, yes, but not because they are quick to harm. They are dangerous because they adapt. They are dangerous because they do not yield to the limits that control the rest of us." Ethan stood quietly in the back, unnoticed. No one clapped. No one cheered. It seemed humans didn't need that kind of recognition. They simply existed. And that, it turned out, was enough. Later, as students filed out of the hall, Lyra, an alien classmate, approached Ethan. Her eyes were wide with a complex mixture of fear, respect, and pure fascination. You changed everything today," she said softly. Ethan just shook his head. "I didn't change anything. I just lived. But your way of living, it terrifies everyone," she replied, her voice barely a whisper. Ethan smiled, that faint, knowing smile again. "Good. Let them be ready." In the days that followed, reports about the human anomaly, Ethan Cole, spread far beyond the Academy. The Galactic Council itself issued a simple, chilling note to be added to their official records. Never judge a species by how loudly they scream. Judge them by how calmly they endure. Humans survive because they endure, and this quality makes them unpredictable and dangerous to all others. Ethan walked through the Academy courtyard one last time that week. Alien students watched him from the corners of their eyes, their whispers following him like a shadow. In their silence, respect had grown stronger than fear, but the fear was still there, quiet, cold, and undeniable. He sat by a quiet fountain and, for no particular reason, wrapped his healed hand with a fresh bandage. He watched the water ripple, thinking. Somewhere far away, council members were arguing, trying to devise a strategy for dealing with a species that refused to break under pain, stress, or fear. Back in the academy, one alien student muttered to another, "We have not seen the last of them." Ethan smiled to himself, not because he had won or proven a point, but because he had simply lived, as humans always have, and in every ripple of fear, respect, and quiet astonishment spreading across the galaxy, one truth was becoming crystal clear. Humans do not need to fight loudly to be feared. They do not need advanced weapons to be dangerous. They endure, and that alone is enough to terrify the universe. The Academy remained calm on the surface, but every mind that had witnessed Ethan Cole that day carried a new, unspoken warning. The galaxy had met a human, and humans were not to be underestimated. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more tales from across the galaxy. See you next time.